Today I'm going to be talking to you first about the importance of aligning content efforts with business goals. Then we'll go through a definition of release notes, talk about the potential value of release notes, and then ultimately how to unlock that value for your company. But really, this is a story about my journey to product content enlightenment. I've been working in content for 15 years, and along the way, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've learned a lot, and I've tried to distill everything that I've learned about release notes into this presentation. Call me a reformed hippie, but I like to think about my professional journey as a journey to enlightenment and a journey to product content enlightenment. So in that spirit, I'll start with a question. If a tree falls in the forest with no one to hear it, does it make a sound? I can hear some enlightened people in the room already. To bring it a little closer to home, if a feature deploys without documentation, does it exist? Now, today I'm going to walk you along this journey to product content enlightenment, and hopefully you'll arrive at answers to these existential questions along the way. And the first thing I'd like you to bear in mind is when we talk about product content, we're talking about people. We're talking about our users, our team, and our business. And every decision that we make in terms of language, in terms of content, should be with these three groups in mind. Because ultimately, if we're thinking about growing a content team or supporting a content team, you have to take care of your people. You have to take care of your users, your team, and your business. And the business is the group that has the most authority when it comes to supporting and growing a team. So it's vital that any content decisions that you make and any strategy that you have around content is aligned with business goals, and also that you can show the impact that your decisions have. If you're choosing between one font and another, one word and another, one type of publication and another, those impacts of those decisions need to be clear. But in order to get there, we need to make sure that we're aligned on what it is that content teams do. And for me, there's a very important mantra. Product equals functionality plus content. This equation is a mantra that I think is extremely valuable to keep in mind, both for engineers and for content people. Because engineers create functionalities. They make the product do what it does. And it's content teams who complete the product. And without that content, the product is just a functionality. It's incomplete. When we think then about the purpose of product content, this can differ in different companies, but as a general approach, I would say number one, product content is intended for current users rather than prospective users. This is a really important differentiation between product content and product marketing. You're not trying to get new users, you're trying to help the users that you already have. When we think about release notes specifically, obviously we're talking about announcing new features and updates. And all of this type of content, whether it's release notes, help articles, product tours, they instruct and they guide the use of new and existing features. We've also seen at Muse that product content plays a very important role with customer support. Our customer support agents are using the help articles in our knowledge base to answer questions for customers. They're attaching those articles to email questions that the customers are sending in, and they're using the content to educate themselves about new features as well. So there's that internal benefit. And if we widen our scope of product content and think about API documentation, we're thinking about a different subset of users, implementation partners, and product content has a very important role to play there as well. So how do those purposes come to life through actual pieces of content? Again, this can differ from company to company, but in general, product content is responsible for release notes, for help articles, for technical customer communication, API documentation, product tours, and content design microcopy. And today, I'll be focusing specifically on release notes. So what are they? most of you are familiar with release notes. Maybe you even have something to do with the publication of them at your company. But we'll ask our helping assistant, handy assistant here, ChatGPT. And as it tells us, release notes are documents or notifications that a company's software updates new versions or product releases. And release notes generally have one or more of these components. So the definition is clear. Let's take a look at how some contemporary product companies use release notes. This is an example from Apple. It's an iOS update. What do we see when we look at this release note? It's very minimalistic. We have a couple sentences of overview. We have a link to more release notes. We have a couple known issues and a workaround. This is really the bare minimum information that the company feels obligated to share with users. What I don't get from this is the feeling of excitement that I get when I look at a product release video or a product marketing video from Apple. I don't get any sense of excitement. I don't get any sense of brand tone of voice. I don't get any sense of urgency as to why I should take this update, what benefit it's going to give me. And also, I don't get much instruction. There's no links to further reading. So this to me is a release note that's an afterthought. You know, they're fulfilling the bare minimum obligation and missing an opportunity to instruct and delight users. Slack is a company that does interesting things with release notes. You can see here that they do versioning, and they tend to, like Apple, have very minimalistic short release notes. I want to draw your attention to the bug fixes down at the bottom, where it says, we tuned up the engine and gave the interiors a thorough clean. Everything is now running smoothly again. This is funny. It's cute. It connects to that tone of voice that I associate with the Slack brand. It gives me a smile. It tells me absolutely nothing about what was wrong and what was fixed, and should I be worried? Is my computer, going to break or something? So it's, I would say, a little bit more interesting, a little better than the Apple release note, but there's no instruction, there's no real content here, and there's no value. It's an afterthought. This is an example of a release note from Muse just before I joined the company. Rooming lists make group reservations a piece of cake. Download a rooming list from a group reservation, send it to guests for completion, then instantly import all of their details back to Muse. What I like most about this is the visual. We didn't see visuals in those previous examples. Visuals are extremely important for users who are actually trying to figure out how to use the new feature. So the more you can actually show them the product surface and point out the feature rather than describing it in language, the more value they're going to get of it. Piece of cake, a nice piece of colloquial language in the title. I like that gesture toward a human tone of voice. That could be complicated for translation or complicated for non-native speakers. And then we just have that one simple sentence, which is instructional, which is good. There's a link to the knowledge base for further reading, which is good. But there's, again, no sense of urgency. There's no sense of value. There's no sense of, there's no way that I can understand as a user what problem this is solving for me. So again, I see this as a missed opportunity. So I'm talking about unlocking the potential value of release notes, and I've put potential in parentheses because, as we've seen from these previous examples, most companies are not unlocking that potential. What I see as the three most important pieces of potential value for release notes are that they can be a key customer touchpoint, they can inform employees of updates, and ultimately, as we'll see, they can drive feature adoption. Key customer touchpoint. What we've seen as we've progressed along our journey to product content enlightenment at Muse is that when you put value into the release notes, users take value out. And over time, they come to trust the release notes, to rely on them, and even, as we'll see, to use them as a point of two-way communication between themselves and the company. If we didn't have release notes, there would be no other way for users to stay informed about new updates and how to use them. So release notes can really be a crucial touch point for customers. But we've also seen the value of release notes is internal as well. If you work at a product company of any moderate or large size, it's probably a complex organization. You probably have multiple product teams releasing multiple things at varying frequencies. And for teams that are outside of R&D or outside of product, teams like marketing and customer support, it can be a real challenge for them to know what you're releasing, exactly when it's being released, what's the value and the pain point that you're addressing, and how to use it. And that is a crucial role that release notes can play. And as we see alongside the idea of release notes as a key customer touch point, we're not just informing users about new features so that they know that we're releasing lots of cool stuff. Ultimately, we're trying to increase feature adoption. So we'll see in a few minutes how that can happen. And in order for that to happen, we need to move release notes from being an afterthought to being an asset. We need to make our release notes more effective. How do we do it? There are 4 steps on our journey to product content enlightenment, and 4 steps to more effective release notes that I'll walk you through today. The first is bringing release notes inside the product. The second is adding scannable details, structure, brand style, and visuals. The third step is to gather data and iterate. And the fourth step is to share the good news. So the first step, bringing release notes inside the product. In this example that I showed you back in 2020, when a release note was published, on our platform, there would be a little notification in the top right. The user would click on that. It would open a new tab on their web browser, take them to a web page outside of the product, releases.muse.com. They would read the release note. Then they would go back into the product and try to put into practice any of that information. So this is the definition of pull content rather than push content. We are making users, in this case, channel hop to leave the product, to tell them something about the product, and then to go back into the product to try to figure it out. This is not ideal. So the first step in more effective release notes is to turn that pull content into push content. You don't want to make users go and search for the release notes. You want to bring the release notes to them. So in 2021, we started using a tool called Beamer, one of many great release notes tools out there. And you can see the difference here. Now, when there is a release note published, they can click on the notification, and rather than opening an external tab in their web browser, it opens a widget on the side of the screen, and they can read that release note. They can click on an emoji. They can give comments to the release note, and they can scroll down and find older release notes as well. This has been revolutionary in terms of the value that our release notes bring to customers, and that's why this is the first step toward more effective release notes. What we've seen in terms of results in bringing the release notes inside the product is that more users can find the release notes faster. We're putting them, in front of their screen, in front of their face. As soon as the release note is published, if you're logged into Muse, you see the notification. This means that there's a closer connection between documentation and product. And as I said, I believe that documentation is part of the product. It's not external to the product. So we need to replicate that thinking in the way that we're delivering this content. It also closes that conceptual gap between the instructional content that you're feeding to users and where they can actually make use of it in the product. And finally, we've seen the engagement with our release notes really skyrocket as a result of this. And I don't mean just that everyone who's logged in sees the notification. I mean, users are actually opening the release notes, looking at the release notes, opening the knowledge base from there, commenting on the release notes as we've seen. So this first step has been extremely valuable for us. The second step to more effective release notes is to add scannable details, structure, brand style, and visuals. To bring your mind back to that Apple example, when I watch a marketing video, a product marketing video from Apple, I'm excited. It makes me really excited, even if I'm never going to buy the VR goggles. When I look at those release notes, I don't feel anything at all. And that's a problem. You want your release notes to be as engaging as your product is and as your brand is, because your release notes are your product and your brand. So what we've done in terms of adding scannable details, structure, brand style, and visuals, you can see this is the whole release note here broken up. Muse Digital Assistant, your ultimate Muse support companion. We are thrilled to introduce Muse Digital Assistant, an AI-powered chatbot designed to elevate your Muse support experience. Now get swift and accurate responses to your queries, so seeking support no longer means lengthy email exchanges. So what we've done here, first of all, is scannable details. When you look at the release note as a whole, you can see that we've broken up the text into small chunks. We've added emojis, we've added bold text. This makes the release note much easier and faster to read. It's glanceable. The value is delivered, almost instantly. You're not confronting the reader or the user with a wall of text like an encyclopedia page that they need to somehow scan through. This is especially important for multilingual or international audiences where your users might not all be native speakers of English or whatever language you're writing your release notes in. We can also see here, of course, the GIF. Now, this is taking that visual from the first Muse example and pushing it even further. We're not just showing a static picture, but we're actually showing the process of engaging with the new feature, in this case, the AI chatbot. This is extremely helpful for users. They don't have to read the description of it and then try to figure it out. They can just follow along with the GIF. Overall, we can see with the opening sentence, for example, we are thrilled to announce we have a bit of the brand style. Muse is a very excited company, and we try to convey that sense of excitement when we're releasing new features. At the end, we see, excited, and then there's a call to action. Here's how you can do it. Here's further reading in the knowledge base. So here, we've made the release note much more scannable, which makes it faster and easier to use. We've added a very specific structure, which I've mentioned, but which also, I should say, foregrounds the value of the feature. Within the first two sentences before the GIF, we're explaining what is the pain point that we are addressing with this feature. In this case, the long wait for customer support. We are giving the brand style and that sense of enthusiasm. We're making it more visual. This is a much more valuable piece of content than any of the other examples we've seen. And what I also want to point out is we're talking directly to the user. We're saying, we're excited for you to use this. Are you excited? Here's how you can use this. So we're creating a dialogue between the product and the user, and that dialogue is completely absent from those earlier versions of release notes that we've seen. So by doing this, we've found that the content is more engaging for users, it's easier and faster to use, and ultimately there's a shorter time to value, both for the release notes and for the features that we're trying to promote. The third step to more effective release notes is to gather data and iterate. And maybe you're thinking now, okay, in order to gather data, we actually need to have some audience for release notes, but do users really even read release notes? This is something that I heard a lot when I joined Muse back in 2021. Nobody reads the release notes. Nobody cares about the release notes. The release notes don't matter. Find something else to do. Don't worry about them at all. And my personality being what it is, I immediately focused all my energy on the release notes because I saw those as a place of great potential value. Do users read release notes? We've seen that they do when they're done well. So here we can see in January 2021, when I joined Muse, we had about 2,000 monthly active users of the release notes. These are people who are actually engaging regularly with the release notes. When we pulled the release notes inside the product in October 2021, we pretty much immediately jumped to 20,000 monthly active users. And you can see how year on year that has continued to grow. In August, we tipped just about 40,000 users for the first time. And so you can see that this year's growth is outpacing others. This 40,000 represents over 70% of our monthly active users of the product. So of course, as the product scales, you would expect the release note audience to scale. But the point is we're reaching a massive number of our users who are, again, not just seeing the release notes, but they're using them and coming back again and again, finding the value there. So clearly, if release notes are done well, people will read them. But in the design department, we care a lot about design experience and content experience. We are touchy-feely. I said I'm a reformed hippie. We care if users care. So how can we measure that? I showed you on the earlier example how there's the emojis that users can click on, and there's also a comment box. And we've leaned into community management through our release notes. We actively engage with the comments. We measure the sentiment and we report that back monthly to the product teams. And here's some examples of the type of engagement we get. Very important for us. I'm very excited for this feature. This is what we call an actionable comment. It has a piece of information that is valuable for the product teams. In this case, we want to know if people are excited about this feature. Is this feature important for this particular user? What is it about this user that makes the feature important for them, and how can we extrapolate that to other user groups? Trump for president, God forbid, but that's an example of a non-actionable comment. This is not the type of commentary we're looking for. This is not the type of commentary we engage in. But ultimately, what we're trying to do by engaging with these comments is increase the quality of the comments, increase what we call actionable comments, and decrease political and non-actionable comments. And we've seen that by really leaning into this community engagement, we have actually increased over the course of this year those actionable comments. The goal was about 65% and above, and we've kept it over 80% since the beginning of January. So what we're seeing is that customers want to engage. They want to get in touch with the product team, and they're willing to do that if they feel that the release notes are a two-way street, a two-way touch point. So in terms of this community engagement and community management, ultimately, why are we paying attention to sentiment? Why are we responding to comments, which obviously takes a lot of work? The ultimate objective is to improve the release notes, yes, but ultimately to improve the product based on user feedback. There's a lot of testing that's being done in UX research and user interviews, but we in content have our own channel where we can communicate back and forth with customers and gather data from that. So in order to do this, as I said, we're consistently engaging with the comments, and we're reporting the statistics for every release. Over here, you can see a month-on-month breakdown of positive, neutral, and negative sentiment. And what we've done for the engineering teams is gamify this by reporting every month which release had the most positive sentiment in order down to the least positive sentiment. And it's become kind of a competition among the teams who can, win the prize this month for the most positive sentiment around their release. And when you think about that, when you think about product teams competing to see who can delight the customer more, that's going to make you happy. It's amazing. So users do read the release notes. They do care about them. But how do release notes benefit the business? We've seen that by putting these steps into practice, there is a marked difference in feature adoption before and after release notes. You can probably guess when we published the release note here. This is a feature that we released without notification, and then we have the release note on Jan 16th, and you see that immediate spike in feature adoption. What's really interesting, though, is that there's that long tail, that it doesn't just spike and then go back down. It maintains a higher level of adoption than previously. And we can see this again and again on different features. We release a feature, it's really hard for people to know about it and how to use it. We release that content in the release note and the help articles, and the adoption goes up. No matter what type of company you work at, what type of product you're building, you want people to use it. And feature adoption is a key performance indicator for any product in any team. In this way, we can see the crucial role that product content and specifically release notes play in that KPI. So by gathering data and iterating, we've increased the engagement and the trust of the users who have come to see the release notes as a valuable touch point for them. We've really increased the visibility of our team and the impact that we can show, which is very, very important in a business. And ultimately, by looking at this data and making decisions based on it, we can make smarter decisions both about the content and ultimately about the product. Our fourth step to product content enlightenment is to share the good news. When you've done all of these things, you want to take advantage of the work you've done and promote it. So what we've done at Muse is created a Slack channel where we publish all of the new release notes as soon as they're out, along with all the supporting documentation. Things like Confluence pages, Jira tickets, all that background information that goes into building the feature, as well as any help articles that we've written or updated for the new feature. And what we've seen with several hundred people in this channel is there's a great deal of excitement and engagement from outside of R&D, from the CEO, from marketing, from customer support. We've seen that people outside of R&D come to this channel to find out what the heck we're releasing. Why are we releasing it? Why did we build it? How do we use it? What pain point is it addressing? Without this channel, it's a black box. It's really, really hard, as I said at the beginning, to keep an overview of what's going on in a complex product company. And in a content team that's working with all of the product teams, you have a very unique point of view, a high-level overview of everything that's happening. And so therefore, you have that value to bring, and you have that responsibility to provide that value and provide that point of view for the entire company. So by doing this, we've massively increased the team's visibility within the company. We've provided this value of keeping everybody informed about new releases, and this has ultimately allowed us to get more support to grow the team, because the value that we bring is clearer than ever. There's a value for users that we have data for. There's a value for feature adoption. There's a value internally in the company. What else can you ask for? So, value. Unfortunately, for most companies, that value of release notes remains potential. To review, we've talked about release notes being a key customer touchpoint, a two-way communication between the user and the product teams. We've seen how release notes can inform employees of updates, and ultimately, and perhaps most valuably, we've seen how release notes can drive feature adoption. But if you're not enlightened, you can't unlock the value. So how do we unlock the value? How do you unlock the value? There's the 4 steps on this journey. Bringing release notes inside the product, adding scannable details, structure, brand style, and visuals, gathering data and iterating, and sharing the good news. So I've been telling you about my journey to product content enlightenment, but ultimately, this is about your journey, which begins today if it hasn't already. And as you take that journey, there are a few things I want you to remember. Product content is about people. It's about the users, it's about your team, and it's about your business. And to succeed, to grow and support a content team, you have to take care of your people. You have to keep those groups at the front of mind. And you're keeping those groups at the front of mind because ultimately you need to align your decisions in content with your business goals. And to do that, I think it helps to remember the mantra that product equals functionality plus content. Without content, the product is incomplete. And so walking through this journey, you should now perhaps have an answer to this question. If a feature deploys without documentation, does it exist? I agree. And I agree because ultimately, if your product releases don't make noise you're not doing it right. Thank you very much. I'll be in the speaker's corner.